Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. Or actually, it's afternoon. Goodness me, where's the time going? Welcome back to the ROS Media channel. It is around 12:30 on Friday, 8th of May. We are live across our socials. So if you're joining us on the social media channel of your choice, we'd love to hear from you in the chat because the chat's live as well. And today we're going to have a real deep dive into this particular subject matter, why the Clifford Protocol recoupment process ticks all the IRS boxes and bypasses any algorithmic freezes. Ian, great to have you back. I know we've spoken about the Clifford Protocol, currency creation, signature recoupment. We've spoken about this on many occasions, but what I'm excited about today is that you've actually, I know you never settle. When it comes to research, you'll put a report out, and then within a week, sometimes less, there is a refinement of that. There's a deeper dive into that. There's more stuff that you've uncovered that just enhances that. And the report that you've put out recently, which we're going to go through step by step today, is just another example of that for me. It's where we've gone through the Clifford Protocol, but you've now done a real deep dive into exactly why it ticks every box, and importantly, why it bypasses these algorithmic freezes and why other people are failing miserably to even come close to making this work. So I think for new people coming in, a lot of people look at them, and again, we've spoken about this, a lot of people look at the finance world and they think it's another world. I can't understand it. I can't comprehend it. It's not in my space. It's almost like it's this black box, isn't it, that never gets opened. And what they're not realizing is that their hard-earned cash and their hard-earned values and their time and their energy are just disappearing into this black box, and nobody ever decides to open it and have a look at what's inside. Well, we're going to open it today. So we're going to discuss a proven methodology that's been responsible so far for documenting over 600 million in transcript evidence. And that was just in 2025 alone. So we're going to show you how you can stop being a debtor in the system's eyes and how you can start acting as the true creditor of your own energy. So maybe just to kick this off, because you know me, Ian, I like to look at this from sort of a layman's perspective, or somebody who's, just coming into this and doesn't understand it at all, never heard anything about it. Let's talk a little bit about the hidden reality of, somebody's money, shifting this perspective from working for money 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Some people are working 2-3 jobs at a time. They're working weekends, to actually originating your own credit. In terms of the money side of things, we speak about 1933 quite a lot as being a pivotal moment. I mean, in the financial system, when it comes to real money that people maybe understood years ago, that was backed with things like gold, what are we actually using these days? And how does this law of discharge that you talk about change the rules of the game for people?
Well, there's a word called usufruct, which is an interesting word that you probably won't hear very often.
No.
And it's essentially where one party provides something to another party who uses it, and then charges the creator, the owner of it, like a rent. So it's an extraordinary scenario, isn't it? That you might have something that you own, it's yours, or you originate it, you provide it to another party who then uses it, but charges the originator rent or taxes or levies. And that is exactly what is going on here. The human energy is originating from all the living men and women, yeah? And what they're doing, without realizing it, is they're transferring it onto this artificial monopoly board. And then the players on the monopoly board that are known as the banks, who are operating as trustees, fiduciaries, nominees for the living men and women who put their energy on the board, are being charged for the use of their own energy. It's usufruct. And then to make it even more egregious, all the assets on the monopoly board are mortgaged to the other creditors on the monopoly board, which is the original banking families that lots of people will know the names of the big banking families, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers and the Astors and all of these very, very wealthy banking families from years back that have carried on going, of course, because they go through, the bloodlines continue on like a dynasty. And everything on the monopoly board was mortgaged to basically underwrite the bankruptcy of the United States in 1933. So you've got two things going on. You've got the energy it's transferred onto the board, where people don't know that they're doing an energy transfer onto the board, which is their signature credit. And then you've got the board itself made up of nominees that are supposed to be looking after the interests of the settlor, which is like the living man woman who's settling their energy onto the board, being charged for it, and then thinking and believing that they are buying things with the currency that the banks are providing, what they appear to be providing, like they provide a mortgage to buy a house, but they don't realize that the mortgage is doing nothing other than basically moving them into a slavery model where they never actually get to own the house. They only get the use of it, same as the car, same as the business, same as any digital investment, including cryptocurrency. It looks like they own these things. The living man woman through the birth certificate constructs. It looks like they have ownership. They have, amassed wealth on the monopoly board.
Yeah.
When they don't realize that everything on the monopoly board that is registered to support the bankruptcy that happened in 1933, which answers the question: why do you have to register your car? Why do you have to register your house, your factory, your hotel, your anything, right? And why do you have to register your bank account? Why do you have to register your stocks and shares portfolio? Why do you have to register your cryptocurrency portfolio? Why do you have to register anything? And the answer is because it's a user-fruct system, meaning that whatever you think is yours isn't. And what is yours, which is your human energy, you are paying rent or taxes for the use of your own energy, and everything you think you are buying on this monopoly board game is actually already owned by the other creditors of the bankruptcy of the United States. So it's got to be, for me, the biggest deception ever created in human history, because it's everywhere in the world. It's trillions and trillions of dollars of value, or what people think is value, where nearly everybody you meet, if you ask them, could you write down for me your assets and your liabilities, they will come up with, and I used to do this for my clients, some will have a huge asset base and a small liability base, and they'll think that they're really, really wealthy because they think they've got a house and a business and maybe some other things, boats, and who knows what else they think they've got. In reality, they've got nothing at all. All they've got is the use of these things, which they then have to pay taxes to use the stuff which they think is theirs. That's user-fruct, and that's what we are revealing on our interviews and in my webinars. But it doesn't have to be like that, because there is a pathway out of it, of course, and to solve that problem. But most people don't even know how the game works, and that is the biggest issue. The so-called experts don't know how it works. I didn't know how it worked. Years ago, I was living in a delusional world, thinking I understood how the system worked, and I didn't understand it. It's only because of my deep research do I understand how it works. And then for me, research never ends, right? So you can't say I've researched this subject and I don't need to look at it anymore. For me, you always have to keep looking at it. because there's things out there that you don't know until you really deeply look. And then the more you look, the more you find out. And that's been my discovery over all the things that I've researched in the past. And what I've noticed, Andy, is a common theme, right? In everything I've ever designed, there is a common belief, normally held by so-called professionals, about how things actually, how they believe that things work, right? And most people who go into the professions never challenge the popular belief within their profession. And it's very, very evident in the world of money, what we call money. All these so-called professionals, and I would estimate that if there's 1% of the so-called professionals who actually understand how it works, I'd be very surprised. I think it's lower than that. And yet they don't ever do research. They believe what they're taught. They believe others in their circle, in their professional circle. They don't question anything, and they appear to do very well, many of them. And I say, controversially, that they are utterly incompetent, and they don't deserve to do well at all. Because what they're actually doing is, without knowing it, inadvertently, they're advancing modern slavery in everything they do. That's all the way from the people who work in the low levels of financial services organizations, all the way through to the top people in the banks and the big financial services, investment managers, custody agents, all the people that I used to work with. If you don't understand the industry you're in, should you be in the industry? That's what I say.
Yeah. Now, you speak in the report about the vast majority of people, and again, this is just going back down to people's basic understanding and knowledge, because it's all they've ever known and all they've ever been taught, that banks lend us money. That's what people think. But how does the protocol itself, the Clifford Protocol, prove that it's actually your signature that creates this value? You talk about creating credit ex nihilo, don't you? At the moment that somebody signs, that there's that intention there. So how does that part work so that people can understand that?
Well, it wasn't my original research. It was actually, the light bulb went on for me in about 2016 when I read Professor Richard Werner's 3 foundational papers. And, I'm supposed to be a money expert, and I read his papers and I thought, wow, how did I not already know this? I'd overlooked the money creation model. I was managing the money after it had been created. I wasn't looking at how it got created.
Not questioning where it came from.
I wasn't questioning it. I was just accepting that I'm managing it when people bring me their, financial affairs, and I'm restructuring and managing and all the things I used to do. I never once looked into where does it spring into existence from? How does it get here? And when I read Richard Werner's papers, Professor Richard Werner's papers, a massive light bulb went on, and it made so much sense to me that I couldn't just let that drop. I had to look into it further. And as I've gone on, now we're 10 years later, and my research into it, I don't know how many hundreds of hours I've put into this, but it's a lot. And the more I look, the more I find. And that's why I keep doing the research, because common belief is that money is, is provided by the central banks, or it's provided by the government in some way. That's what common belief is. And then the banks, what they're doing is that they're taking deposits from people that are affluent, who've got credit balances, and leaving that with the bank as a depositor. And then, of course, the common belief is that the banks are intermediaries, and they're lending out these deposits to people who want to borrow for a mortgage or a loan or a credit card. And very, very few people ever question that, because it seems to make sense. You've got, you've got two sides of the equation. You've got savers on one side with credit balances. You've got debtors on the other side who are borrowing the savers' money, and the bank sits in the middle, making an interest rate that's justifying the interest rate that they're charging, and it kind of justifies if the borrowers on one side of the equation don't pay the debt back. Common belief is, and I've had arguments with bankers on this because they don't understand it. I had a very heated argument with a guy I've known 35, 40 years who was a very senior banker at HBOS, a guy I've known personally for many, many years, where his belief was if people don't pay back their mortgage or their loan or their credit card and get themselves into difficulty, they deserve every egregious consequence coming to them. And I argue with him. I said, man, you don't understand that the banks don't lend money. So if you don't understand that, then I suggest you go and research it, because what right does a bank have to foreclose on people and take away what they believe is theirs, which of course it isn't, and give them all this grief and anxiety when the bank never lent them a dime? They didn't lend them anything, literally nothing, zero. Could you imagine, setting up a stall in the high street and offering loans to people, and then somebody comes over to you and says, well, how does your loan system work? And you say, I'll tell you what, how much you've got in your wallet at the moment? Oh, I've got $100 in my wallet. Oh, okay, give that to me and I'll lend it back to you and you pay me interest.
Yeah.
How many people would go along with that?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think very many people would go along with it, would they? They'd go, well, hold on a minute, that 100's mine already. So what, you're going to say that again? You want me to deposit it with you and then you lend it back to me at interest? No, I'm not interested in that deal. But that is what people are doing every day, every moment of every day all around the world. But instead of them giving the bank their wallet, they're giving the bank their energy. And the bank is converting it and then sending it back to them and saying, hey, now you owe us interest. And if you don't pay us, guess what? We'll take you to court. We'll take your house, take your car, take your business, take anything that you've purchased with this money, which they claim that they've lent. And many people are like, yeah, rah, 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 go for it, because the delinquents who haven't paid their debts back, they deserve to lose everything that they have got, because they never deserved that loan in the first place, because they didn't pay it back. They didn't pay the interest. They deserve to be put out on the street and live on a park bench or a cardboard box somewhere underneath a bridge, because those buggers didn't pay their way. And that's what a lot of people believe, and it's fundamentally flawed on every single level, as my research has proven. And that's why I got really interested in it. And because of what happened to my clients years before, where the bank, HBOS, that became Lloyds Bank, literally took £1 billion worth of assets from them. Yeah. And, ruined them. Many of them very significantly affected by that. It wasn't just throwaway money that they didn't care about. It was like life-changing events that happened. And then I realised that the bank never actually provided a loan, and therefore didn't have the right to take all the assets which they were taking. So to me, it was like something I had to understand, and that's where we are today, 10 years or more later, because this story's been going on for me actually 20 years, because it was 2006 where I realised that the bank on the monopoly board was insolvent and blew the whistle on it. So this is a 20-year journey for me. It's not something I've just been looking into the last few weeks.
No, I think a lot of people don't fully appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit more about this, because we've spoken about the signature and how that creates the credit, but we also talk quite a lot about original issue discount. And without getting super technical on this, but why is the issue price considered to be zero? Because I think that's something that a lot of people can't really wrap their head around. And, and how did the bank sort of capture the original issue discount income that should technically belong to you?
Well, you see, the banks are operating as nominees, so trustees, fiduciaries, as we've covered in previous interviews.
Yeah.
So when you open a bank account and you appear to be depositing funds into it, or maybe somebody else is depositing funds into it, and then you want to spend the funds out of that bank account, as soon as you transfer, or what you appear to be transferring funds out of the bank account to somewhere else, could be to many, many other parties, what you're actually doing is you are creating an energy deposit. You are depositing new energy, which in the technical references is a negotiable instrument. It is a promise to pay in the future. And that energy is then transferred from you, the living man, woman, onto the monopoly board through the birth certificate construct, which is the personal, the citizen, the legal, the legal persona, and it's an artificial persona, and also a banker, because it's as confirmed in the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, that a person is a banker.
Is a banker.
The artificial construct is a banker that's issuing a negotiable instrument, which is a security, and its issue price is zero because it's based on human energy, and human energy doesn't have a substance value. Well, when it transfers onto the monopoly board, it then has a usufruct future value. It has a high future value, which, get this, isn't a positive, it's a negative.
Okay.
Because it becomes a debt. So it doesn't go on the board with a big positive. It goes on the board with a zero, and the future value is actually negative. It's a deep negative.
Okay.
Because it's there. Even though it's reported as a positive value, it's in effect a negative value because it's debt. Debt is negative, yeah? Debt is negative, credit is positive.
Yep.
Yeah? It's like two ends of a battery. One is positive, one is negative, yeah?
Negative, yeah.
So it's a deception that is very, very confusing even to the experts, and hardly anybody out there, I believe, knows that the human energy doesn't have a substance value because it's energy. It doesn't have substance. You can't hold it.
No.
You can't put it in your safe or put a rubber band around it like a wad of notes. It's energy. It's zero value when it transfers on. But then it becomes it becomes this tradable commodity, if you like. Bit like, you could say it's a bit like the electrical current that comes out of a socket.
Yeah.
You can't pick it up, you can't put it in your bag, you can't take it away in your suitcase. It's energy, yeah. It's just like that, and it goes on the board at zero. And there's two reasons why. One is that human energy can't be valued, right? It's impossible to value it off the monopoly board in the world of the real. You can exchange it. I could say to you, Andy, I'll come and cut your hedge if you wash my car.
Yep.
Yeah, and you say, yeah, fantastic. I'm not very good at cutting hedges, but I'm really good at washing cars, so that's a good trade, yeah.
Yep.
And that's what we do. I cut your hedge, you wash my car. We're both happy, fantastic. That's bartering. Yeah, that's the system of bartering. Very few people do that these days. What they do is they make a payment for the hedge cutting or the car washing. Yeah, and it looks like that's a reasonable system, doesn't it? Because everyone's doing it. But what they're not realizing is that there's no substance to that either.
No.
It's just artificial. Everything's it's an artificial game that is being played that has checks and balances, just like the game of Monopoly does, where you have notes and you exchange them when you have to pay for things on the Monopoly board, and then you collect some more when you go around, round past go, you get some more. It's exactly the same as that. It's just why the game of Monopoly was introduced, because it's actually telling you right to your face that this is real. This is what you are doing. You are really playing Monopoly here, but you don't realize it. It's so blatant that's why that game was introduced. And if you go and read into it, you'll see that I'm right. It was introduced just for that purpose. It's like a piss take, really.
Yeah.
And nearly every family has played it at some point. So
yeah, absolutely. The hotels and the houses.
Yeah, it's like go. It's that popular. It's still popular. I mean, probably not as many people play it now as they used to, because they're playing video games or looking on social media. But still families play it to this day. So it goes on the value board at 0 because it's no substance. But the other reason it goes on at 0 is because it enables the nominees, the banks as nominees, to put a future value on it and a term of years on it.
Right.
So that it now becomes a tradable security. It's a negative value, but it's still something they can trade. And when you really get your head around what the banks pretty much do, what they do. If I had to say in one word, what do banks do? Securitization.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where they make their profit, which isn't profit because it's all negative. But in the world of the negative, a bigger negative is a good thing. Yeah. So if you've got a lot of securitizations on your books, so you're trading the future value of human energy, which is what they are doing, just like the slave masters used to do years ago, renting out slaves in the fields for profit. That's what the banks are doing.
Yeah.
And because they are debtors, and this is the critical part of my research. The banks are debtors, right? So they get to use the human energy. Whilst they're using it, they can appear to make lots of profit, and they can report these profits and have huge profits. You go and look at banks' profits, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Those profits are actually negative, but on the board, everything's negative. So it kind of works. And then and this is the critical part of it, they pay taxes. The banks are paying taxes for the use of human energy. Now, if you owned the human energy, you would not be paying tax on it.
No.
To the bankruptcy trustee, which is the United States Treasury. So the mere fact that they are paying taxes for the use of the energy, which is original issue discount, proves that they are debtors. And when they pay tax for the use of the human energy, they are paying it to the bankruptcy trustee, who should be giving it back to the true creditors, which is the men and women, the living men and women. But the men and women never claim it because they don't know how. And they don't even know that they can. And that is what's going on with this deception.
It's very masterful, I have to say.
It is. I'm not afraid to say this, right? There's a lot of talk in alternative media in the last few years about aliens, and I'm not afraid to align to that. There's huge amounts of evidence. There was an alien force that came to the planet thousands of years ago. There's artifacts, there's pictures, there's carvings on walls. I think you're going to Egypt soon. You'll see a lot of it there if you care to look for it.
I sure am, and I know. Yeah, there's a lot that doesn't make sense to me in terms of pyramids, technology of the day versus the artifacts and how accurate they are.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who've dedicated a lot of their time to studying it. It's absolute evidence. I've seen it. There's websites, there's pictures, there's videos. There's no question, and they're even revealing it in the United States, in senior members of the government, are actually saying that they have got evidence of unexplained entities, as they call them. Well, it's alien technology, right?
Yeah.
Now, this system that is been running for over 100 years, I don't believe there's anybody intelligent enough on this planet to design the system that is operating. I just don't accept it. It's too clever. And it's not just happening here and there, it's all over the world. Now, how do you get a system to operate all over the world, as genius as this system is for modern slavery? And are we supposed to believe that some old guys in 1913 who thought up the Federal Reserve Act and then went off to Jekyll Island and had a sit round in it for a week, smoking their pipes and drinking sherry, with their their banking history and their banking knowledge, came up with this system in 1 week? Are we meant to believe that? Because I don't. I simply don't.
Makes you wonder who was at Jekyll Island with them, doesn't it?
Well, it does. Yeah, indeed. I mean, there are many people who believe that there is a hybrid technology, is hybrids. I don't dispute that either. So if people are going to turn this video off, that's okay. But go and look into it, and you'll see that there's a lot of people out there who are researching the alien origins of the system that we're all running in, and the control agenda it aligns to an alien control agenda.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this original issue discount a little bit more, because I know, and many of our members know that there have been people who have tried to file 1099 OIDs. And in a lot of cases, they're getting themselves into quite a bit of a mess with that as well. So when someone tries to reclaim this credit energy, using specifically, as you mentioned in the report, their social security number, why does the IRS automatically flag that as a bankrupt debtor instead of a person who's actually owed that back?
Well, taxpayers are not entitled to tax rebates. That's a sweeping statement, right? Not within the original issue discount process. Other taxes that people are paying, in inverted commas, that they might have overpaid, yeah, you can get a tax rebate there if you are a taxpayer, but not in the world of human energy. You can't.
No,
because as the issuer of the negotiable instruments that created the bank payments, that created the mortgages, loans, and credit cards, you have no standing to recoup or get a tax rebate on the a redirection of the taxes which the banks are paying for the use of the energy. You have no standing to do it. Because on the Monopoly Board, the artificial construct of the person, the citizen, the banking entity, the birth certificate entity, that is always a debtor. And in the world of 1099 OID, has absolutely no to recoup signature credit as tax recoupment or tax rebate. They have no standing, and many people try. I've tried in the past. Some of them have gone to jail. Literally, people all over the world today are trying it because they don't understand how the system works.
Yeah.
They genuinely believe that they are entitled to recoupment. There are videos on YouTube where people are presenting it like it's the Holy Grail. And follow these steps and you can get a recoupment of your under 1099 OID. Some people are doing barter exchange, which is called a 1099B system. Many people do that. It's the same. You're not entitled to that either, because the living man woman is not making the claim for the recoupment of the signature credit. It is the debtor entity. The living man woman is the agent for the debtor entity. That's the person. And it's the person, the birth certificate construct banker, that is filing with the IRS for credit recoupment. And some people have actually had it, and this is what makes it worse. Because the IRS system wasn't sophisticated enough to identify early claims for recoupment, many people got checks. Many people got quite substantial amounts. And then, of course, the word spreads. This is what you do: fill in these forms, and you get a massive check back. And that actually happened in many cases. That can be clawed back, by the way. The IRS can claw it back. They have a 3-year window where they can claw it back. And many people had never had their checks clawed back. So they thought, well, that works, so I'll tell everybody I know, and then other people start doing it until the IRS brought in more stringent controls, which maybe we'll talk about in a moment. So
indeed, yeah, I do want to talk about that. So, okay, so there's clearly a lot here to do with the standing in terms of who is actually making the filing or what entity is making the filing. So we'll dig into that as well. So let's talk a little bit about this freeze, this transaction code 810 freeze, that moment where the IRS locks a filing down, and why this happens more often now because of this new programming that's been launched or was launched in 2022 that you mentioned, that the IRS has gotten more sophisticated now. They've got this algorithmic programming that they're using that's pinpointing the entity that is making the filing in the first place. And if they're using an ITIN number or an SSN, that is what's causing these freezes. So can you just explain what this code 810 freeze actually is?
Well, it's an algorithmic system that the IRS employs. I mean, I think most people realise that the IRS receives hundreds of millions of tax returns every year.
Yeah.
This is not a small shop, is it? This is a big organisation. And in order for them to process all that, they've got very sophisticated computer systems. And obviously they've got algorithms that check data. I'm sure they're using AI as well. So they basically know everything that's going on with all these different securities that are being issued. And they have a referencing way of knowing what's going on, and also what has already gone on for many years in the past. So the algorithm can very quickly determine the standing of the tax filing entity. That's if it's done on paper. Has it been done with tax filing software that's been approved by the IRS? Is there an electronic reporting officer, a tax preparer with a license to file the tax returns and the tax claims? What is being claimed? What is the entity that is the tax is coming from? Which bank is holding the payments or making the payments on their 945 tax modules? What CUSIP numbers, which is the reference numbers for all the securities that are where the energy is being bundled up and put into these housings, they're like wrappers, and they have a number, they have a reference number called a CUSIP number. It's like think of it like a box. You put all these things in there, you close the lid, and that box has got a number, and everything in the box is the human energy transactions. So that's what the CUSIP number is. So the algorithm 810 looks at all of that and determines whether it can verify the recoupment or is it going to block it. And if it's going to block it, it will be because either the filing entity is not the right, hasn't got the right standing, i.e. they're filing from their SSN number, their social security number. They're actually putting that on the forms. They're putting a what's called a tax reference number on, an ITIN tax reference number, or a TIN number, which is the tax reference number. So they're straight away, they haven't got the right standing to file the 1099 OID, because they're putting that tax reference number down as the recipient of the recoupment.
Yeah.
Because on the 1099 OID, you've got one box, which is who is paying the taxes and how much do they owe back to the recipient. Recipient is the entity that is actually issuing the filing, is the entity being filed for. So if you're putting on the 1099 OID, Ian Clifford stamp, ITIN number, 10 digits, recipient of recoupment, and JP Morgan, $1 million is taxes owed to Ian Clifford stamp, the birth certificate construct, tax payer, the IRS system is going to see that straight away, and it's going to deny it just on that one point, right? Unless it makes an error, which I don't think it will do now, because they've really tightened it up. Let's say it's not Ian Clifford stamp, it's a trust that is filing. Well, is it the right type of trust that is filing for 1099 OID tax recoupment? Because there's only, in my research, there's only one type of trust that can file as a creditor entity, and that is the grantor trust, foreign grantor trust, not a domestic trust, because you can create a domestic trust in the United States if you're in the United States, and you can file as that is the recipient. You could file as a sole trader, that is the recipient. You could file as a limited liability company, that could be the recipient. Well, none of those entities have the credentials to be creditor entities. It's actually more than creditor. They've got to qualify to be nominees.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because if it's the standing of the entity that is filing that is causing these freezes for people and these frivolous filings and even imprisonment, like you've said, then that should be a real focal point. And I know it was a huge kind of moment for you, wasn't it, when you realized that the 98 series grantor trust was that gateway onto the monopoly board. So let's talk a little bit about that then, because when it comes to setting this structure up, how you can move into this fiduciary status, instead of using an SSN, why do you say within the Clifford Protocol to use a 98 series international trust to create this gateway, this almost impenetrable wall, if you like, between you and the system?
Well, it's a non-tax reporting entity that is a foreign alien to the United States system.
Right.
Which is why it's called a foreign grantor's trust. So the grantor is not a taxpayer in the United States, and the entity itself, the trust entity, which has an EIN number, so although it's got an employer's identification number, it is not seen as a US taxpayer. And that there makes it a potential nominee. As a nominee, it's operating as a fiduciary for the living man woman who is the beneficiary of the trust. And that makes it very similar to a bank. In fact, it's no different from a bank, right?
No.
So what you're doing is you're creating an entity that qualifies to receive tax recoupment because it is a nominee for the true beneficiary. The true beneficiary is the living man woman. The entitlement holder of the credit energy tax recoupment. They can't step on the monopoly board, so they put a nominee on the board, which is the 98 series. It doesn't even have to be called a 98 series, but it has to be a foreign grantor's trust. And interestingly, when you apply for one of those, it can also be it can be a ministry as well, but we won't go into that because we don't really need to. Because the ministry is non-reporting as well, and basically it's not a taxpayer. That's the bottom line, right? And it can operate as a nominee. That is a huge 2 ticks in the boxes. When I realised how the system was working with nominees, and this was in 2024, when I researched that the only way that you could legitimately and lawfully recoup signature credit energy or taxes was if you were doing it through a nominee structure. That was like massive light bulb to me.
Yeah.
And that happened in late 24 when I was researching, how we had been filing in 2024 and why it wasn't working. And it was because of that. It was because we were using a domestic trust, i.e. a US domestic trust, filing 1099 OID, and then getting a load of questions from the IRS.
Yeah.
Which caused me to look into why. And that's what, the conclusion was that the big light bulb moment was the entity that is sending the filing in, not the agent, not the tax preparer, but the actual tax filing entity was a taxpayer, not a non-taxpayer, foreign entity, foreign grantor's entity that qualifies as a nominee.
So this is quite a powerful structure by the sounds of things to have, because you've got nominee status, non-taxpayer, international, so not even US jurisdiction, and yet it has, supplied by the IRS, an EIN number, so the IRS can recognize it as an entity, so that you've got that gateway onto the monopoly board. I mean, that's
they've got to they've got to know what it is.
Yeah.
And because they can see that it is foreign grantors, it's a foreign alien in the US tax code. It's a foreign alien, and it is not a taxpayer. And therefore, if it files, and this is what makes it a nominee, when it files 1099 OID as the recipient, that makes it a nominee. So now what you've got is a redirection of taxes from one nominee to another nominee. The bank's paying taxes as nominees to another bank, 98 series grantor trust, just like a bank, one institutional taxpayer over to another one, or one nominee to another nominee. Redirection of the taxes.
Wow. Okay. I want to dig into this a little bit more, Ian, as well. So you talk about Form 56 as well. It's almost like that form is the application for the Office of General Executor, telling the state that you are now the person in charge of managing, in that fiduciary role, managing the signatures credit on behalf of the living person. So maybe not a living person, but obviously just the living man or woman. But could you just explain what Form 56 does and how that fits in to the trust structure itself?
Yeah, well, the form 56 is a power of attorney, and when you know that really what a power of attorney is, it's an agency. You've got an agent who is going to represent the trust.
Yeah.
And that entity that is representing the trust also ticks the right box for the IRS's system. So you have a trustee that is actually operating under a limited power of attorney, or an attorney in fact agent, an agent for the nominee as a corporate agent. Again, ticks the right box on the IRS's system. It doesn't have to be a corporate entity, but it is a lot better if it is.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about IRS 1212 as well, because that rule book that actually requires banks to return this abandoned property, this abandoned credit, to the true owners. How does that specific documents slot in to this structure as well, so that people can understand that? Because there's so many layers to this, and I want people to understand not just that it's possible, but also to really understand, okay, this is the correct way that it needs to be set up. These are the forms that we administer and that we fill in, and here's the backing, here's the historical backing as to why we can do this as well.
Well, it's an interesting number, 1212. And there's no coincidence that it's 1212, because that, if you look at angel numbers, that means something. And it's also quite significant in terms of computing. It's like ones and zeros. It's like a binary.
Yeah.
And what it's telling you in publication 1212 is it's telling you how to redirect the taxes. That's really what it's all about.
Okay.
Many people would read it and not really understand what it's telling them, because the language is it's complex how they've written it. They haven't made it easy. There's no simple English version of publication 1212. It's a deep technical document, like all the IRS documents. But there's one paragraph in it that gives the whole game away, which is that whoever files 1099 RYT basically becomes the creditor. It doesn't explain it with a big bold underline and red flashing lights on it, but it's in there. And that is basically the giveaway. But it doesn't tell you who can or what entity can file 1099 OID. So this is where people go wrong. They get into it. They watch a video on YouTube, or they join some guru group. They pay money, and some guru says, "Look at IRS publication 1212," and it comes from a guy called Gene Keating, who I researched a lot in my early stages of this.
I think he had quite a long video, didn't he? Follow the yellow brick code, I think he called it.
Follow the yellow brick code, yeah. And he's got a 3-hour lecture. You can find it on YouTube. It's Gene Keating, who's no longer with us now, apparently. He's sitting there on his stool, and behind him is a whiteboard, and he's got all these different documents up there, and he's pointing at all these different things. And the guy was a tax lawyer, right? He was a proper tax lawyer, right? And it's an interesting, I mean, you probably couldn't endure it for 3 hours, but I have done. I've actually watched it a few times because I had to understand what he was talking about. And he is basically saying that whoever files 1099 OID becomes the creditor, but he doesn't know about the grant or trust to foreign alien. Because years ago, you could file as a taxpayer and get a recoupment. And I think that's when that video was made, back in those days, which is like 15, 20 years ago. You could file paper tax returns, 1099 OIDs, 1040s, various other tax forms as a taxpayer. And the IRS system wasn't anywhere near as sophisticated as it is today. And people were getting checks, which they were banking, and it caught on. Some people did it on a mass scale. And it's really because of the abuse of the system, because it is an abuse of the system, that the IRS is tightened right down with algorithms and checks and balances and all of those types of things. And this is why also they're phasing paper filings out pretty much. There's only a few scenarios where you can file with the paper forms now. And they want electronic filing because the electronic filing vets the filing as it goes along. So it's a lot better for the IRS system if filings are coming in that are vetted as they go, as you make them. The filing software is vetting them as you go along.
So I understand that. I understand the structure, and hopefully the members have and people that are watching have a better understanding of the right way and the wrong way to do this. But even when you have that structure, let's say you've got that in place. Okay, so right, okay, I've got my 98 grantor trust, I've got my EIN number, I've got all of those things in place, and you know, I'm now ready to file my 1099 OID. It's not that simple.
No.
Because you also speak about a digital fingerprint, a 26-digit code. So I want to talk about that, because tracking that manually, to me, is an impossible task to do that manually. Just an impossible feat. So talk to me about how, ironically, we are using AI. You know, there's a lot of, I think the jury is very split on AI in terms, or the audience may be very split in terms of AI, whether it's good, whether it's bad. Is it, you know, that's another rabbit hole we could go down. But we are ironically using what a lot of people feel is part of the control agenda, which we agree, but we're using it to help people free themselves from the financial pressures that they find themselves under right now. So Gemini Argentic, how does that search through literally thousands and thousands of pages and bank records to find exactly where your signature was sold or securitized? And if you guys don't think that this happens, that securitization doesn't happen, and that these aren't wrapped into these bonds and given QSIP numbers, then we've spoken about this before. But I actually watched this for the first time last weekend. I've been trying to do it for a long, long time, Ian. But I went and watched The Big Short with Brad Pitt and Ryan Gosling in, and
Yeah.
fascinating film, absolutely fascinating film. So I'd certainly recommend you guys watch The Big Short if you want to understand a little bit more about securitization of mortgages in particular, and what a huge scandal that was. But how does this AI Argentic system track this securitization? Because if everything is securitized, then there's billions of securities flying around everywhere. It would be an impossible task for an individual to do that.
Well, they set up an organization called Seed and Company, the depository trust company, to keep records of every single security that's ever been issued, trillions of them, literally. It's one of the biggest data centers in the world, tracking all the securities, and it's linked to the IRS's system, which is called the IRMF system. And it's basically a huge database that is able to triangulate the issuer, i.e. the signature, or the bank that took the signature in. That's the recipient of the signature. The banks call it a deposit, but actually it's a signature credit event. And it knows the bank. It then knows that the bank has bundled all those signature credit events together and put them into like this box that we talked about earlier, which has got a QSIP number. And then those securities, because that's what they are, they're bundles of securities, just like in the movie The Big Short. They then get traded by typically the investment banks in Wall Street, in New York, and all of those bundles of securities under these QSIP number references are being traded. That's human energy being traded right there, right? Those mortgage bundles that they talk about in The Big Short, that's just human energy, right? It's all it is. And it has this high future value, negative, and the banks are, in The Big Short, they're putting many securities together to make up the Jenga, the game of Jenga with all the different ratings on. And that's all based on whether the alleged debtors, I say the alleged because the banks call the mortgagors debtors when in fact they're not. So the alleged debtors have got different profiles. Because some of them are good payers and some of them aren't.
Some of them aren't so good.
In the movie The Big Short, they bundle all these. They're called tranches. and you put all these tranches in there, like the game of Jenga. And basically, the bottom line is that the banks that are trading those securities, the investment banks, have to pay tax on their 945 tax modules, which of course they don't pay very much, because the 945 module is for recoupment, and very few people ever recoup it. So that's why they underfund them, which we may come back to. So yeah, it's very complex, and the IRMF system, the IRS system, tracks the whole thing with involvement from Seed and Company, Depository Trust Company, tracking every security that's issued all around the world.
Wow.
It's quite extraordinary, the amount of data that these guys are managing.
So every single transaction, we're not just talking about, you know, a huge loan or a mortgage here. We're talking about every time you tap your phone, every time you go and buy something, every time you go and fill your car up with fuel, whatever it is, where that signature has been created, that intention has been met. And there doesn't have to be a physical signature. That can be, like I said, it could be a contactless tap of your phone, tap of your card, whatever it is. There is a 26-digit alphanumeric code or reference number that is attached to that individual security. And that every single one of those is tracked. So how on earth are we using AI to find somebody's mortgage security or somebody's loan that they took out or whatever it may be? How are we doing that?
Well, the clearing banks, they have partners with investment banks. All of them have. And when the clearing banks, that's the banks that you interface with to get a mortgage or to get a bank account, etc., and you know it's disguised. Sometimes you're not actually opening the account with the bank; you're opening it with an intermediary group, which are called fintech banks, but they're not really banks. They don't have a license to convert signature energy into currency. So they don't get the ex nihilo license, if you like. So you get these intermediaries that are feeding signature credit energy to the clearing banks. They clear and convert. That's what they do. And then the clearing banks, that's the big names in every country. There's in the UK, there's 6, arguably 7. In the US, there's probably 100. They're clearing banks. They basically have the license to convert the signature into currency, making it into a debt, and then they can sell that debt to the investment banks, and maybe the investment banks are in their country that they're selling it to, or maybe they're selling it straight to Wall Street in New York. But whatever's happening, the taxes that are being paid on the use of this human energy by the investment banks ends up in the tax module, the 945 tax module of the payer. So if you want to track it from the origination of the signature through the clearing bank into the securities with the CUSIP numbers in from there, maybe through 2 or 3 investment banks into the tax module, 945 tax module, you could manually do that. That's a hell of a lot of manual work.
That's what I'm thinking.
You can use AI, which is, one of the strengths of AI is it can crunch huge amounts of data and make sense of it all. And that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got the ability to scale this, is what we're saying, because we have and are leveraging AI to be able to find these numbers and track where the original security was sold. So that's huge in terms of people understanding, there's validity to this. Why would they have these 26-digit fingerprints? Why would they even be a 945 tax module if this structure wasn't created for recoupment? And why would they only be paying what they absolutely can get away with on the 945 module as well, rather than what they actually should be paying? To me, that's because they know that nobody knows about this. Nobody knows how it works. Nobody knows how to do it. People just accept that money is what it is and that they're not the creator of their own credit in the first place.
Well, what you discover when you look into all these things is that there is I dare to say it, but there is an integrity into the system, right?
Yeah.
In that they don't hide how the system works. They just make it extremely difficult to comprehend it and join all the dots together. They don't, it's not locked away where you can never find all these things. All the information you need is out there. You just need to be able to bring it together and make sense of it. And that's what I've done. And there's no way I could go and find out all of the data to track all the way through from a bank payment or a mortgage from 30 years ago all the way through until a tax payment on a ledger, on a module, sorry, a tax investment bank module, a tax module. I couldn't do that because it would take years.
Yeah.
Literally be on it full time trying to figure it out. So you have to use the same technology that the IRS is using, which is an algorithmic database, probably AI driven system.
Yeah.
To do it, because there's no way you could have all that manual tracking going on, which lines up with my solemn belief and backed with some evidence that AI has been around a long time.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Now, while we're on that subject of, doing things manually versus doing things properly, why is it important? Because you mentioned this a moment ago. Why is it important that we have a professional ERO, this electronic return originator? Why is it important that particular person sends the filings in rather than just, filling it out yourself and mailing in paper forms?
Well, it gives it credibility. You see, to be a tax preparer, you've got to get a license, you've got to qualify. You can't just fill a form in and be a tax preparer. Right. You have to qualify, you have to have all the right credentials. That makes the integrity of the tax filings, it improves the likelihood of accurate tax filings because tax professionals should know what they're doing, right? They should do. Not all of them do, of course, but they should do, on balance, know what they're doing. So if you are filing tax returns as a lay person, a non-expert, that's going to trigger more scrutiny than if you've got a tax preparer, a professional license holder that's using electronic filing software to file the tax returns. It's ticking lots of boxes, for the IRS.
Yeah,
because it's like if you had an amateur firing bits of paper in with, the paper-based version of 1099 OID, who knows who filled it in? Is it accurate? Are these people qualified? Do they know what they're filling in? Probably not. If they're using bits of paper to fire tax returns in to the IRS, they're probably not a professional, because what professional would use paper system when they can use a electronic filing platform?
Exactly.
So it just adds credibility, and the grantor trust, the trustee or the limited power of attorney in fact, that also has to have credibility. At the other end of the process, because they're going to be receiving the recoupments into a bank account, and the entity that is the trustee or is the named trustee for each 98 series grantor trust or foreign grantors trust, that entity has to also tick the right boxes for the IRS's system. Not it's your aunt or somebody who just put the name forward, although it could work that way, but it's much better if the entity that is operating as the trustee of the foreign grantors trust is a professional entity.
Gotcha. Okay.
Institutional professional entity.
Multiple layers to this, but from the report that you put together, everything has been considered. The one thing I wanted to move on to next was, we've spoken about the 945 and how it is that the banks are not, or the investment banks are not paying enough tax onto the 945s. They're just not. They're only just putting on there what they feel they can get away with, because they're not expecting anybody to come in and actually have a front to back solution like the Clifford Protocol to be able to do this. Or if they are, it might be the odd isolated case, and not something that's going to be done for thousands of people like we're currently doing. So let's talk a little bit about that, because when it comes to this strategy of, well, how do we get past that? Your document says that the banks underfund the 945, and that the 945 is what's used to pay back the signature credit, or the taxes owed on the signature credit. So how can they use, or how would they use, multiple billions of dollar surpluses that they've got in other modules to hide what they owe to the living man or woman?
Well, I could easily argue that everything should be on the 945 tax module. There should only be one tax module. Easily argue that, right?
Really?
And they have all these other tax modules, the investment banks that are paying taxes for all different purposes, so they say. But I could say, well, it's all signature credit energy that you're trading, so therefore it should all be on the 945 module, which is the dominant tax module, which is very revealing as well. And maybe we'll come to that, because the IRS have assisted the investment banks in disguising the taxes that they're paying, the taxpayers, banks, debtors paying taxes on the 945 modules and other tax modules. The IRS isn't saying, hey, no, you should be paying all these taxes on the 945 module. They let the investment banks get away with it because it's never changed, right?
Yeah.
And overall, the taxes that the banks are paying probably are accurate, because they've got some smart accountants that work all these things out.
Yeah.
And also, I think only at the very, very top of every single bank is this information known. So you've got to disguise it internally.
Yeah.
And you've got to disguise it externally, because if you make it too blatant, some people like me would go, I've now found what's going on. And it would be a little bit easier to find it out if there was only one tax module, and that was published to be, 1099 OID withholding tax. They have to put taxes on other modules to basically hide the fact that there should really only be one tax module, in my view.
Yeah.
It's what then the 945 tax module, is called something else. They actually name it a different name. So it's not JP Morgan 945 tax module. It's some other name that they put forward, so that it makes it even more difficult if you're looking into the tax receipts of the United States Treasury. You're going to see names of entities that are paying taxes on 945 modules that are nothing like the actual investment bank name.
Unbelievable. So I want to dig into this revenue procedure 2002 to 26 as well, because you talk about how that gives you the right of designation, so that you can actually not ask the IRS, but you can command and tell the IRS exactly how much money they should be moving, or how much taxes they should be moving from one of these other modules onto the 945 to allow for any shortfall, because it has to satisfy the 810 algorithmic process. And from what you've said, you can't file a 1099 OID if the 945 module does not support that, as in your filing is greater than the amount of taxes that have been paid onto the 945. So if you were in that situation and you looked at the filings and thought, okay, we've got $2 billion worth of filings here for our members, but there's only 500 million on the 945s, let's say, how does that cross-modular transfer take place? How is it substantiated?
Well, the grantor trust, if you take all of the grantor trusts, so all of our members have all got a grantor trust, and you add them all together and say, well, let's have a look and see, if you add all the JP Morgan payers 945 tax module payments, you know what they are, and you say, well, what is the 1099 OID recoupment for JP Morgan as the taxpayer for all of the grantor trusts that have a JP Morgan, the linkage between the taxpayer and the recipient. Recipient is the foreign grantor's trust. There might be 100 of them. There might be 500 of them. What is the value of the recoupments for JP Morgan?
Okay.
Just JP Morgan is one of the biggest ones. I use that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 500 million. That's what our members want to recoup taxes on, redirect the taxes from the 945 module, JP Morgan. Well, then you look at JP Morgan's 945 tax filing for the tax year that you are sending your 1099 OID in against, because it's not one 1099 OID for all years, it's based on tax years. Yeah. So if it was 2025, for example, and you want to file $500 million for 1,000 grantor trusts, where JP Morgan is the taxpayer, the 1,000 grantor trusts are the recipients of that 500 million. Yeah. And now you look at the JP Morgan 945 tax module, and it says they paid 250 million. Well, there's a 250 million shortfall. Yeah. So if any of the if 100 grantor trusts file 1099 OID, that they'll probably go through with a wages and tax transcript. They'll get a wages and tax transcript confirmation. But then the other 900 file, and then suddenly there's not enough taxes on the JP Morgan tax module at the 945 module to finance all of that 500 million that you're trying to draw down. So they're going to stop it all. The IRS would just stop it with their algorithmic. So you've got to know.
And 10 freeze comes in, yeah.
Yeah, you've got to know. You can't start filing 1099 OIDs for 1,000 trusts unless you've already cleared the pathway for it, which is the cross-modular transfer. That's what it's about.
So why does the grantor trust have the ability to command the IRS to move it, would be my next question.
Well, because of IRS publication 1212, it's filed 1099. All of those, in my example, 1,000 grantor trusts have all filed 1099 OID. JP Morgan payer, in my example, all of those 1,000 grantor trust filings have made those 1,000 grantor trusts the holder in due course, the creditor, nominee for the living man, woman, institutional, tax redirection, tick, 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 all the boxes from the IRS's algorithm. The next question is there enough taxes on the module? No. Okay, so under the revenue procedures 2002, 2026, the grantor trust can invoke, and I can't remember the code number, but it's an SEC code number, which is part of the commercial code, can invoke the right of the grantor trust, or importantly, not the grantor trust themselves, the officer of the grantor trust. So you have appointed an officer of the grantor trust, which has the right, representing as the agent for, this is the attorney-in-fact stuff, agency. The agent for those 1,000 grantor trusts can command the IRS to move the taxes from other tax modules onto the 945 tax module of JP Morgan, without having to call JP Morgan up and say, hey, we're a trustee, and I understand you've paid 250 million on your 945 tax module. We want you to put another 250 million on there because we're doing recoupments for our beneficiaries. That's not going to go anywhere, is it?
No.
So what actually happens is the officer appointed, it's MLITR research, is the appointed trustee stroke agent for officer of trust, grantor trust, will call the IRS with all the right credentials, having filed Form 56, to become basically be appointed as under a power of attorney.
Yep.
Or attorney in fact from the right entity, because you can't just become an attorney in fact without the right entity behind you. So that's MLITR research, which ticks the entity box, the right entity box, is now going to call the IRS, not just anybody in the IRS. There's a particular professional tax preparer line that the officer of the grantor trust is going to call to command the movement of taxes from other tax modules of JP Morgan onto their JP Morgan 945 tax module.
Right.
Already knowing that JP Morgan, in my example, have paid 250 million. The caller, the officer of the grantor trust, isn't ringing up the IRS saying, hey, can you tell me all about JP Morgan's tax payments, please? Because the IRS is going to say, well, that's their business, it's not yours. The officer of the grantor trust already knows what taxes JP Morgan has paid, because the algorithmic system that we're running has identified 250 million. So the officer isn't calling up saying, hey, I'm just, I just be really quite interested to know how much tax has JP Morgan paid on their 945 module. And the IRS agent is going to say, well, what right have you got to know that? Well, they do actually have the right, because they are the recipient, the lawful recipient. But you can imagine how that conversation could go, yeah?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, IRS agent's going to say, well, you're not JP Morgan, why should we tell you? They actually do have the right to know, but it's going to be a barrier. It's much better to call the IRS already knowing the information.
Yeah.
Because as the recipient of the recoupments, you should already know that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's all about standing, isn't it? Okay. So let's assume that that's all been done, but for whatever reason, the funds have not been moved. What happens at that point? So in terms of an escalation, shall we say? So you've gone through that whole procedure. Everything's been set up fine. You know what's on the 945 for JP Morgan. You've instructed the IRS that we want to see a cross-modular transfer of X amount from another taxpayer module to the 945 to accommodate the shortfall. We're not asking, we're telling. But let's say they don't comply. What happens then?
Well, there's a right in the law, and under the Uniform Commercial Code, you have the right. Not when I say you, the grantor trust, the officer of the grantor trust would be able to take up a lawsuit against the United States Treasury.
Wow. Okay.
Not complying with the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, which commands them under IRS publication 1212 and various other UCC articles to move the taxes. And the revenue procedures 2002 2026 is another massive clue. Why would they create within their own tax legislation and the Uniform Commercial Code, why would they put that in there to give the right of a nominee, a institutional nominee, i.e. the grantor trust, institutional nominee? Why would they give an institutional nominee as a recipient of the taxes the right to move taxes onto the 945 tax module if it wasn't the dominant tax module? Yeah. They wouldn't give anyone the right, would they? They'd just say, well, tough. There's 250 million on here and that's it. Now that to me tells me a lot, right? It says to me very clearly that the 945 tax module, if there's the right to move taxes onto it from another institution who is entitled to receive the tax rebates, tax recoupments, it tells me it's the dominant tax module.
Yeah.
the 9
Yeah.
to 5 module.
I hope there's some light bulbs going off with everybody when they're watching this. It's
Mm.
little things like that that make such a big difference to
Please.
how this game is played and people's
Exactly.
understanding of what they actually have at their fingertips. So I think it's a fascinating report that you've put together. I know that it's, or if it's not already, I'm sure it will be up on the Ecclesia Law website
It is.
as well for people to go and have a look at. Very, very in-depth, guys. If you're into technical, this is going to be right up your alley. If you're not into technical, still recommend that you go and read it, because you really need to understand this stuff. You really do. Knowledge is power when it comes to what we're doing here. And the more you can understand it, the better you'll have a grasp of what's available to you. So my next question really would be, what should people do next, Ian? You know, in terms of action steps, if somebody's watching this for the first time, you know, I get that this particular episode has been a little bit technical, but, you know, we wanted to do it. We wanted to give people an understanding that the Clifford Protocol, we've gone even deeper into that. You've gone even deeper into that in terms of the structure and just making sure this is as robust as it ever could be. And know that from front to back, this works. You know, without a shadow of a doubt, it works. But for somebody brand new coming into this who's thinking, "Man, are you telling me that I can actually recoup my, you know, taxes that were paid on all my mortgages, loans, credit cards, going back to the age of 18?" For me, that could be a life-changing amount. That could change everything for me and my family. You know, we're really struggling right now. What would you say their next steps should be?
Well, I think you should just think about what is the value of your abandoned taxes, because that's what you've done. You've abandoned the taxes. Have a think about, what bank payments have I made from the age of 18? How many mortgages have I ever had, loans or credit cards, just to keep it simple. There are other things that you can recoup, but let's just keep it really simple.
Yeah.
Just estimate, what does that look like? And if you had a business, what is the business bank payments look like? If you've had personal bank accounts for the birth certificate construct, what does it look like? What does that number look like? For some people, it's very high. It's multiples of millions. For other people, it might be $1 million. It might be 500,000. Well, what you should see it as, in my opinion, it's like you've gone in the newsagent and you've bought a lottery ticket, and you've gone home, and somebody sent you a message saying your 500,000, your 5 million is waiting here. Are you going to come and claim it? Are you going to bring your lottery ticket in? Because, and there is a direct correlation here, right? Winning the lottery there's a very small number of people that win the lottery, right?
Yeah.
And that's all random, yeah? It's pretty random, right? What I'm giving you is a chance of winning the lottery with absolute certainty. Who wouldn't want to play that lottery?
Yeah.
And then
do that every single year.
Not get one ticket and then that's your lot. You can claim your lottery ticket winnings every year because you spend every year. So I'm giving you the chance to win the lottery every year with certainty of the outcome.
Well, if you want to learn more about how to do that, then I recommend that you join Ian and I tomorrow morning, because what we're going to be doing tomorrow is we're going to be diving even deeper into the money system and how it works. And we've got a live webinar that we are going to be running. There's only 1,000 seats available for that webinar. And I know in terms of registrations, we're well over 1,000 already, Ian, in terms of registrations. So seats are limited. If you want to be able to attend that webinar, it is 10 a.m. UK time tomorrow. So that's Saturday, 9th of May. And you can register here. If you go to roswebinars.is, you'll be able to register for tomorrow's event that we've got going on. If you are already a member of the Republic of Old Souls and you've been with us for a while, you should be able to register from your platform. But really, we're also wanting to spread this message, and we're wanting to get new people who don't understand how this works yet and educate them on what they absolutely have at their fingertips, that you are not a debtor, that you don't have to go through life struggling just to make ends meet, robbing Peter to pay Paul, not being able to take the kids on holiday, having to say no to things at Christmas time, whatever it may be. You don't have to live that life. You really don't. You've got the ability to create a life-changing amount of credit and recoup that, and be able to do that every single year moving forwards as well. Not only that, but also learn and understand how to protect it all, because we have something called the Monopoly Game Changer, which is a series of protocols, including the Clifford Protocol that we've broken down today. So everything to do with this signature recoupment, signature credit recoupment going back to the age of 18. But in addition to that, learning how to even elevate your own standing. We've spoken a lot about standing today, the standing of the trust, the structure and how important that is. Don't you think that your personal standing should also be elevated to support that? Well, there's an ability for you to do that too with what we call the envoy protocol. And then when you've got all of that in place, there's even the ability for you to be able to protect it all and ring fence all of those assets in what we call the asset fortress protocol. Those three key elements together, signature recoupment, envoy protocol, and asset protocol, that is the package. That is our flagship. That is the Monopoly Game Changer. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how the money system works and how you can benefit from that Monopoly Game Changer, come to the webinar tomorrow, 10 a.m. UK time. We would love to see you there. I'll be hosting, Ian will be presenting, and I think that's going to give you a lot more understanding as to how this really works and just how much you potentially could be recouping when you think about going back to the age of 18. So before we let everybody go, Ian, any final thoughts?
Well, we're just launching the Ian Clifford avatar. It may even be available for the webinar. I'm trying my hardest to get it ready. Our IT team is all over it at the moment. I'm pushing them along as I do when I want something done, and you'll be able to ask it questions. And if you also want to bring other people into the webinar, you can get it's $100. I've just changed it to dollars, because we're doing everything in dollars. $100 for referring someone who comes to the webinar, which you can use as a discount against the enrollment donation for the Monopoly Game Changer. And also what you'll be able to do is to, if you want to send the Ian Clifford avatar to people with a link, you'll also get $100 for everyone who engages with the avatar.
Right,
which you can use to set off against your enrollment donation to start off the Monopoly Game Changer. So if you have a big network of people that you can bring to my webinars, just by sending them a link and they attend, they've got to attend for 70% of the webinar, or the same people you want to send the avatar link, which you'll be able to do. Then you can get $100 for anyone who engages with it for more than 10 minutes, because they can't just click on it and you don't get $100 for them just clicking on the link. They have to engage with it, and then you'll be able to ask questions about every webinar I've ever presented in the last year, all my technical research papers at Ecclesia Law, all the other sort of Q&As that you and I have done, Andy. All of that stuff's in there. And you can have a dialogue with it 24/7, and you can use it to give you a discount, qualify for a discount off your Monopoly Game Changer donation. And in theory, we haven't seen it yet, but I think it will happen. Some of our members will be able to enroll for $0, because they'll have enough credit by webinar and by avatar rewards points, or reward $100 per referral, that they will be able to enroll for $0.
Which is amazing, particularly for people who are struggling right now, to have that barrier to entry dropped that low. There's no reason why you guys should not be doing this. There's no excuse. The Ian Clifford avatar is going to change everything, I feel, for people, because it literally gives the masses the ability to converse with Ian as if they were doing it like we are right here, to ask whatever question you want to ask, get a direct answer from all of the research, all of the content that we've ever put together, all of the webinars, all of the interviews, all of that is loaded into the avatar. It has a wealth of knowledge. So when that comes out, when we launch that, definitely you want to be leveraging that. Leverage it for your own education, but leverage it to help others as well. So I'm excited about tomorrow. Looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. We would love to see you there. For those of you who commented in the chat, thank you very much for your comments. Very much appreciated. But for now, we will let you all go. Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Nice and sharp. Bye for now, guys.
Bye now.